I signed the contract without reading all of it. Not my proudest moment, but when you're 3 months behind on rent and the recruiter's dangling that signing bonus in your face, you tend to skip the fine print. "That's the last page, Mr. Elliott," said Dr. Peters, sliding a ballpoint pen across the metal desk. Her office aboard the Deep Current smelled like salt and electronics. The contract was thick. Employment terms for specialized technical personnel, maritime regulations, insurance waivers, 6 months minimum commitment, all standard stuff for offshore work, or so I figured. I'd worked oil rigs before. This couldn't be that different. I scrawled my name on the line. Gary Elliott, drone operator, had a nice ring to it. "Welcome aboard," Dr. Peters said, gathering the papers. She was all business. Hair pulled back tight, uniform pressed crisp. The kind of woman who'd alphabetized her canned goods at home. "Your quarters are on C deck. You'll start training with Evans tomorrow at 0600. "Yes, ma'am." I stood up, eager to get out of the cramped office. 3 days on this ship and I still hadn't gotten my sea legs. The constant swaying made my stomach do flips. "One more thing." She reached into her desk drawer and pulled out a laminated card about the size of a playing card. She slid it across to me. "These are your operational guidelines. Memorize them." I picked it up. 5 rules typed in bold black letters. 1. Never use the drone's lights below 8,000 meters. 2. If you lose contact with the drone, do not attempt to re-establish connection. Initiate recovery protocol immediately. 3. If you observe any bioluminescence that appears to form patterns, terminate dive and report to mission control. 4. Maintain continuous verbal contact with mission control during all dives below 9,000 meters. 5. If you hear any unexplained sounds through the drone's hydrophones, cut all external audio immediately. I read them twice, waiting for the punchline. "These seem specific." I looked up at her. I thought I'd be mapping thermal vents, taking samples. "You will be," Dr. Peters said, her face unchanged. "Then what's with the rules? Especially number 3, bioluminescence that forms patterns." The door opened behind me. A tall man with military bearings stepped in. Colonel Pearson, the mission director. I'd met him briefly during orientation. He nodded at me, then at Dr. Peters. "Is there a problem?" he asked. "Mr. Elliott has questions about the operational guidelines," Dr. Peters said. They exchanged a look. Something passed between them I couldn't read. "Those rules," Dr. Peters said, turning back to me, "will keep you alive, Mr. Elliott." The way she said it, flat, matter of fact, made my skin prickle. Not a threat, a statement of fact, like telling me water is wet. "I understand," I said, though I didn't. "Not really." "Good," Pearson said. "Dr. Peters will show you to your quarters." I pocketed the card, nodded at both of them, and followed Dr. Peters out. The ship hummed beneath my feet as we walked through narrow corridors. We were parked 3 miles above the deepest part of the ocean, the Mariana Trench, nearly 7 miles straight down. I'd taken this job thinking it'd be straightforward. Pilot underwater drones, collect data, keep my head down, collect my paycheck. Nothing in the job listing mentioned cryptic rules or ominous warnings. The first week passed in a blur of training. Benny Evans, the man I was replacing, showed me the ropes. He was jumpy, rail-thin, with bags under his eyes that suggested he hadn't slept well in months. "The control room's all yours after Friday," he said, walking me through the drone systems. "Can't say I'm sorry to go." "Bad assignment?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Just ready for something new," he said, but his eyes darted away. "You read those rules they gave you?" "Yeah." "Follow them, to the letter." "Why? What happens if—" "Just follow them." He cut me off. "Don't get creative down there." Over the next few days, I learned the drone systems inside and out. The Deep Current carried 3 units, sleek, torpedo-shaped machines packed with sensors, cameras, and mechanical arms for sample collection. State-of-the-art stuff, built to withstand the crushing pressure of the deep ocean. Benny was a good teacher, but a nervous wreck. His hands shook when he drank his coffee. He kept checking the sonar displays, even when we weren't running operations. And he never, not once, explained why those 5 rules mattered. "You ever break any of them?" I asked on his last day, as we ran a maintenance check on Drone 2. "Once," he said after a long pause. "Number 1, turn the lights on at about 9,000 meters. And? Don't. That's all he said. Just don't. Later that night, I found him in the control room, staring at sonar readings. The screens showed nothing but empty water, but his hands were shaking worse than I'd ever seen. Everything normal? I asked from the doorway. He flinched like I'd slapped him, then tried to cover it with a weak smile. Yeah, just checking things before I go. I moved closer to see what had him so spooked. Anything interesting down there? Benny shut down the display. Listen, Gary, some things in the deep ocean, they're better left undisturbed. He stood up, gathering his things. Remember that. He brushed past me, leaving me alone in the control room with the blank screens. Outside the reinforced windows, the ocean stretched black in all directions. Somewhere far below us was the bottom of the world. I pulled out the laminated card, reading the rules again. What the hell had I signed up for? What was down there that had Benny so scared? And most importantly, what might be lurking in the depths below the ship? I couldn't sleep after Benny left. Kept thinking about the way his hands shook when he stared at that empty sonar screen. The way he said some things are better left undisturbed. Like he'd seen something down there he couldn't unsee. My quarters on C deck weren't much. Bunk, desk, locker, shared bathroom down the hall. But they beat the hell out of my apartment back in Seattle with the leaky ceiling and the landlord who'd been threatening eviction. 3 months behind on rent will do that. The signing bonus from this gig had wiped that slate clean at least. First week of training was done. Second week, they said I'd be flying solo. Just me and the drones and whatever was waiting in the dark below us. I got up early Monday morning, showered, and headed to the mess. Grabbed coffee and some eggs, sat alone at the corner table. Most of the crew kept to themselves. Scientists doing science things. Military types doing whatever they did. And me, the new drone jockey who replaced the twitchy guy nobody talked about. The control room was empty when I got there. I fired up the systems, checked the diagnostics on all 3 drones. Green lights across the board. I pulled the laminated card from my pocket and set it on the console. 5 rules. 5 lines between me and whatever had spooked Benny. Dr. Peters came in while I was running final checks on Drone 2. Morning, Elliot. Ready for your first solo dive? Yes, ma'am. I straightened up, tried to look confident. Just finishing pre-flight. She nodded, looked at the monitors. We need a mapping run today. Eastern Quadrant, Section 4. Depth profile of the trench wall from 7 to 9,000 meters. Copy that. I pulled up the navigation chart, marked the coordinates. Any particular features I should look for? Just standard mapping protocol. Record everything, flag any thermal vents or geological anomalies. She paused. And remember the guidelines. The way she said it wasn't a reminder, it was a warning. Yes, ma'am. I tapped the laminated card. Got them right here. She gave me a long look, then left. I watched the door close behind her and let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. The launch sequence was straightforward. Drone 2 dropped into the water with barely a splash. The monitors filled with murky blue as it descended. 7,000 meters came and went. 8,000. The darkness got thicker. I kept the lights off, following rule number 1. Used the sonar and thermal imaging instead. 9,000 meters. The trench wall scrolled past on the screen, jagged and ancient. I completed the mapping run in about 3 hours. Sent the data to the science team. Got a brief confirmed message back. Then I sat there, staring at the drone's depth readout. 9,047 meters. So close to that magic number Benny had mentioned. 9,000 meters, where he'd broken Rule 1. Nobody was in the control room with me. Dr. Peters was in the lab. Colonel Pearson was wherever colonels go during the day. I had the place to myself. I eased the drone deeper. 9,100 meters. 9,200. The pressure readouts climbed, but the drone was rated for full trench depth, nearly 11,000 meters. What was another 1,000 or so? 9,500 meters. The trench floor came into view on sonar. Flat in some places, rumpled in others. My finger hovered over the light control. 1 click and I'd break rule number 1. See what Benny saw. I pulled my hand back. Not yet. Not on my first solo run, but I kept going down. 9,800 meters. The comms panel lit up. Incoming call. I ignored it. 9,900 meters. The control room door opened behind me. I didn't turn around. 9,150 meters. Elliot. Colonel Pearson's voice, not angry, Worse, calm and deadly serious. "Bring the drone up, now." I froze, hand on the controls. "Sir, I'm just..." "Now, Elliot." I reversed thrust, started the ascent, turned in my chair to face him. He stood by the door, arms crossed, watching the depth readout tick backward. "Report to the command center when the drone reaches 7,000 meters. "Yes, sir." I swallowed. "May I ask?" "You may not." He left without another word. I watched the drone climb, 9,800, 9,600, 9,400. What was down there that they didn't want me to see? What had spooked Benny so bad? When the drone hit 7,000 meters, I put it on autopilot to continue the ascent and headed to the command center. 2 decks up, through the narrow corridors. The ship rolled gently beneath my feet. The command center was bigger than the control room. More screens, more stations. Colonel Pearson stood with Dr. Peters at the main console, looking at sonar data. Neither looked up when I entered. "Reporting as ordered, sir." I stood at what I hoped was a respectful distance. Pearson turned slowly. "You were pushing the depth limit on your first solo dive." Not a question, a statement. "I was curious about the trench floor, sir." "Curious?" He said the word like it tasted bad. "You know what the depth limit is?" 10,000 meters, sir." I'd read that in the manual. "And you were at 9,950, sir." Dr. Peters looked up from the console. "That's cutting it close for someone who's been warned about the guidelines." "The guidelines say no lights below 8,000 meters. They don't mention depth limits." Wrong thing to say. Pearson's jaw tightened. "The depth limit is implied in your operational parameters. You were briefed on standard mapping depths." "Yes, sir. I completed the assigned mapping run. I was just curious." "Yes, you said that." Pearson stepped closer. "Let me tell you what happens to curious drone operators, Elliot. They see things they're not prepared for, things that end their missions permanently." The way he said it sent a chill through me. "What happened to the others?" I asked. "Sarah, Kim, the ones before Benny." Dr. Peters and Colonel Pearson exchanged a look I couldn't read. "They broke the rules," Dr. Peters said finally. "Don't make their mistake." I wanted to press, to ask what exactly had happened, but the look on Pearson's face told me I was already on thin ice. "Understood, sir. Ma'am, it won't happen again." "See that it doesn't." Pearson nodded toward the door. "You're dismissed." I spent the next 3 days doing exactly what I was told. Mapping runs at safe depths, sample collections from the upper trench walls. No questions, no pushing boundaries. I was the model employee. On Thursday, they sent me deeper. 8,500 meters, still within the guideline limits. I was tracking a thermal vent when I saw it. A dark shape moving across the sonar. Big. Bigger than any fish I'd ever seen. Moving in a way that wasn't quite right. Not like a whale or a shark. More deliberate. Almost mechanical, except it changed direction too fluidly. I switched to thermal imaging. The shape was colder than the surrounding water. I remembered Rule 2. If drone contact lost, don't re-establish. Initiate recovery protocol. But I hadn't lost contact. The drone was working fine. The shape moved closer to the drone. I kept the camera trained on it, heart pounding in my chest. I hit the comms button. "Control room to command. I've got something on sonar at 8,500 meters. Request assistance." Dr. Peters' voice came back immediately. "Nature of contact? Unknown biologic. Large, moving in patterns I can't identify." A pause. "Hold position. We're coming down." I watched the shape circle the drone. It moved like it was curious, like it was examining the drone the same way I was examining it. I thought about Rule 3. If bioluminescence forms patterns, terminate dive and report. There wasn't any light coming from this thing, just darkness. The control room door opened behind me. Dr. Peters and Colonel Pearson entered, moving quickly to the console. "Status," Pearson demanded. "Contact holding at 8,500 meters, approximately 30 meters from the drone, moving in circular patterns." I pointed to the sonar screen. "There." Dr. Peters leaned in, studying the readout. "Size estimate?" "Hard to tell. Maybe 20 meters long, 5 or 6 across at the widest point." "Temperature differential?" "-4 degrees from ambient." I switched to thermal imaging to show them. "Behavior?" "Circling. Sometimes it stops, hovers, then circles again, almost like it's studying the drone." Pearson's face went hard. "Maintain visual contact. Do not approach. Do not engage." If it approaches within 10 meters, initiate emergency ascent. Yes, sir. I watched the shape complete another circuit. What is it? Neither answered. They were whispering urgently behind me, words I couldn't quite catch. Containment and protocol, and not again. On the screen, the shape changed course, started moving directly toward the drone. Contact approaching, I reported. 25 meters, 20 meters. Prepare for emergency ascent, Pearson ordered. 15 meters. Dr. Peters moved to the comms panel, keying in a code I didn't recognize. 12 meters. The shape stopped, hung motionless in the water. Then, between one sonar ping and the next, it vanished. Contact lost, I said, scanning the screens. No visual, no sonar return. Sweep the area, Pearson ordered. I rotated the drone, checking in all directions. Nothing, just empty water. It's gone. I looked up at them. What the hell was that? They didn't answer, just stared at the empty screens while I sat there, wondering what else was down there in the dark, watching us watch them. I was still staring at those empty screens when Pearson cleared his throat. Control room, 20 minutes, he said, then walked out without waiting for my answer. Dr. Hayes followed, but stopped at the door. Don't mention this to anyone else on the ship, she said. Then they were gone, leaving me alone with my drone still hanging in the water and my questions hanging in the air. I ran the sonar sweep twice more. Nothing. Whatever that thing was, it had disappeared like it was never there. I put the drone on a slow ascent pattern, leaned back in my chair and rubbed my eyes. 4 weeks on this job and I still didn't know what the hell I was looking for, or what was looking for us. The control room was quiet when I showed up 20 minutes later. Pearson stood with his back to me, studying something on the main display. Hayes sat at the console, scrolling through data. Sit, Pearson said without turning around. I took the chair across from Hayes. Neither of them spoke for what felt like a full minute. What you saw today, Pearson finally said, is classified under Section 12 of your contract. The contract I hadn't read completely. Great. Has this happened before? I asked. Hayes and Pearson exchanged a look. We've had similar encounters, Hayes said, which is why we have the protocols in place. Those things on the card, I said. The rules. Pearson nodded. Those rules exist for a reason, Elliot. I wanted to ask more, but something in Pearson's face told me I wouldn't get straight answers. Not yet, anyway. You're on geological survey tomorrow, Hayes said, changing the subject. Trench wall at 7,000 meters, standard mapping run. Yes, ma'am, I said. Pearson turned to face me directly. Keep the drone above 7,500. We don't need another incident. I nodded, even though I wanted to point out that today's incident had happened at 8,500 meters, well above where he was now telling me to stay. Dismissed, Pearson said. I got up to leave, but stopped at the door. Sir, Dr. Hayes, what happens if it comes back? Follow protocol, Pearson said, and pray it doesn't. The next 3 weeks went by without anything weird showing up on my screens. I mapped sections of the trench wall, collected water samples, and ran standard tests on the thermal vents we found. By the 4th week, I was almost starting to think that whatever I'd seen that day had been a one-off. Almost. Tuesday of my 4th week, I was running a geological survey at 7,200 meters. Standard stuff, monitoring the drone's path along a section of the trench wall we hadn't fully mapped yet. I'd been at it for about 2 hours when every screen in front of me went black. I checked the power connections, toggled the main switch. Nothing. The whole system had gone dead. I grabbed the radio. Command, this is Control. I've lost all feeds from Drone 3. Repeat, all systems down. Static answered me. I tried again. More static. I started the reboot sequence, counting the seconds in my head. 5, 10, 15. At 35 seconds, the screens flickered back to life. The video feed stabilized, showing Drone 3's twin lights cutting through the darkness, illuminating a section of rough trench wall. Then I saw it. A second pair of lights, identical to my drone's, hovering about 20 meters away. I froze, finger hovering over the control stick. Those weren't my lights. Couldn't be. The drone only had the 2 front-mounted spots, nothing else that could be reflecting or... The second pair of lights moved when my drone moved, turned when my drone turned, stopped when my drone stopped. I checked the deployment log. No other drones in the water. Drone 1 was in maintenance. Drone 2 docked. This was the only unit we had down there. So what the hell was that? I hit the comms button. Command, this is Control. I need Colonel Pearson or Dr. Hayes immediately. The second set of lights mimicked my drone's movements perfectly, like some kind of underwater mirror image. When I panned left, it panned left. When I stopped, it stopped. Same distance, same orientation, same everything. Pearson's voice came through the speaker. Report. Sir, I've got a situation here. There's something down there with drone 3. Looks exactly like our lights, moving exactly like our drone. Current depth, 7,200 meters, sir. Surface, now. But sir, that's an order, Elliot. Full ascent, maximum speed. I pushed the throttle forward and the drone began to rise. The mystery lights followed, keeping perfect pace. It's following us up, I reported. Maintaining same distance and movement pattern? Acknowledged, continue ascent. I watched the depth gauge, 6,000 meters, 5,000, 4,000. The lights stayed with us the whole way, matching every small correction I made, every slight change in speed. At 3,000 meters, the second set of lights vanished. Just disappeared. No fade out, no distortion, nothing. One moment they were there, the next, gone. Contact lost at 3,000 meters, I reported. Bring the drone all the way up, Pearson ordered. Then report to my office. Pearson wasn't happy. He paced behind his desk while I sat there trying not to look as freaked out as I felt. You're certain there were no other drones deployed? He asked for the third time. Positive, sir. I checked the logs before and after. And the lights matched ours exactly? Same intensity, same spacing, same color temperature, like looking at a perfect copy. Pearson stopped pacing and leaned on his desk. This information doesn't leave this room, understood? Yes, sir, I said. But what was it? Some kind of military tech? Russian? Chinese? We don't know, he said, which was the first straight answer I'd gotten since I took this job. Has it happened before? Pearson hesitated. Once. Last year. I waited for more, but he just straightened up and told me I was dismissed. The next week, my fifth on the job, I was running drone 2 at 6,800 meters, collecting water samples near a series of newly discovered vents. Standard procedure: approach, extend collection arm, seal sample, move to next location. I was reaching for my coffee when I heard it, a voice coming through the external audio feed, the hydrophones we use to monitor the drone's surroundings. Repeat, position, require assistance. I sat up straight. The voice was faint, distorted by the water and distance, but definitely human. It had an odd echo to it, like it was bouncing off the trench walls. Mission parameters. Report status. My hand moved toward the comm switch. Someone was down there. Someone needed help. Then I remembered Rule 4. Maintain verbal contact with mission control below 9,000 meters. And Rule 5. Cut external audio if unexplained sounds heard through hydrophones. But this wasn't just unexplained sounds. This was a person. Had to be another drone operator, maybe from another research vessel. Someone in trouble. Please respond. Position. Mission. My finger hovered over the switch. I could just respond. Find out who it was. If someone needed help. But those rules. There were only 5 of them, and they'd been drilled into me from day one. They were there for a reason, Pearson had said. I pulled my hand back and hit the mission control button instead. Command, this is Control. I'm picking up a transmission through the hydrophones. Sounds like a person requesting assistance. Morrison answered this time, not Pearson. Cut external audio immediately. But sir, if someone's... That's an order, Elliot. Cut it now. I flipped the switch, and the voice disappeared. The control room felt suddenly intensely quiet. Drone returning to surface, I reported. What about whoever's down there? There is no one down there, Elliot, Morrison said, his voice flat. Not anymore. An hour later, I was sitting in the command center with Morrison, Hayes, and Pearson. Morrison looked older than he had when I'd seen him that morning, the lines in his face deeper. Last year, he said, we lost a drone in the eastern quadrant, and its operator. Lost how? I asked. Aurora Park was an exceptional drone pilot, smart, experienced, but she didn't always follow protocol. Morrison's gaze fixed on something far away. She was operating at about 7,000 meters when she reported hearing a transmission similar to what you described. Despite direct orders, she responded to it. What happened? She lost contact with her drone shortly after. When the feed came back online, she reported seeing lights, not just her drone's lights, but others, moving in patterns. She followed them, taking her drone deeper. The last transmission we received from her was at 11,200 meters. That's below crush depth, I said. Our drones were only rated to 10,000. Yes, Morrison said. We lost drone signal completely after that, and then we lost Aurora. What do you mean, lost her? My mouth had gone dry. She collapsed at her station. By the time medical reached her, she was gone. Morrison's voice was matter-of-fact, but his eyes gave him away. Autopsy showed a massive cerebral hemorrhage. No warning, no explanation. I sat back in my chair, trying to process what he was telling me. And you think it was connected to whatever she saw down there? Whatever she heard? We think, Pearson cut in, that the rules exist for a reason, and that breaking them has consequences. I thought about that voice, asking for position, for mission parameters, how close I'd come to answering. So when I heard that voice today, I started. It wasn't human, Hayes finished for me. At least not anymore. When reporting the incident, Morrison revealed that the previous year's expedition had lost both their drone and operator, Aurora Park, after she responded to a similar communication. I was on my 7th week when I found the ship. Not that I was keeping track, really. You just sort of fall into a rhythm out there. Wake up, eat, check the monitors, run the drone, file the reports, sleep, repeat. The days blur together when you're floating above the darkest spot in the ocean. That morning started like any other. I was running Drone 2 through an unmapped section at about 8,900 meters. Just routine stuff. The brass wanted more detailed scans of the eastern wall of the trench. Something about mineral deposits or volcanic activity. They never gave me the full story. Maintain current depth and continue mapping grid pattern, I said into the comms. My voice bounced back at me in the empty control room. Nobody else around, just me and the machines. I watched the screens as the drone glided along the trench wall. The sonar showed the usual features: rocky outcroppings, sediment shelves, the occasional thermal vent. Nothing special. I'd seen it all before. I took a sip of coffee, cold because I'd forgotten about it for the past hour, and was about to start the next sweep when something odd appeared on the edge of the sonar. A large, angular shape where there shouldn't be one. Not natural. Too straight. Too regular. The hell is that? I muttered, setting down my mug. I adjusted the drone's course, bringing it around to get a better look. The shape grew clearer on the screen, definitely man-made. Large, broken into sections, sitting at an odd angle against the trench wall. My finger hovered over the light switch. We weren't supposed to use the lights below 8,000 meters, rule number 1 on that damn card. But I was almost 9,000 down, and I needed to see what this thing was. Rules are meant to be broken sometimes. That's what I told myself as I flipped the switch. The lights came on, cutting through the blackness, and there it was. A ship. A goddamn warship, sitting on a ledge nearly 9,000 meters down in the Mariana Trench. Jesus, I whispered. It was broken in half, the bow twisted away from the stern. The metal was corroded, covered in growth, but the shape was unmistakable. A destroyer, World War II vintage from the look of it. The kind with the long, narrow hull and the gun turrets fore and aft. I'd seen plenty of shipwrecks in my time, had a bit of an interest in maritime history before I took this job. But this was impossible. We were thousands of miles from any shipping lanes, and no destroyer had any business being this deep. They didn't sink like this, not intact enough to recognize. I moved the drone closer, sweeping the lights across the hull. The bridge structure was still there, crushed on one side but recognizable. One of the turrets was missing, probably sheared off during whatever had sent this thing to the bottom. The other was still in place, gun barrel pointed up at nothing. I keyed the comms. Command, this is Elliot. I've got something at 8,900 meters. Looks like a shipwreck. World War II destroyer class. No response. Command, do you copy? I've found a shipwreck. Static hissed back at me. Comms were down again. Happened sometimes at these depths. I turned my attention back to the wreck. The drone's lights illuminated a gaping hole in the side of the hull. Looked like the ship had been torpedoed. The metal was peeled back like a tin can, creating a dark opening into the interior. Something tugged at me. A need to look inside, to see what remained. I could just edge the drone through that opening, take a quick peek. The brass would want to know what was in there. My hands moved to the controls, ready to guide the drone forward. Then I stopped. Rule 5. Cut external audio if unexplained sounds heard through hydrophones. There was more to that rule, though, wasn't there? The unwritten part. Don't investigate the strange. Don't follow your curiosity. Don't look where you shouldn't. I remembered what happened to Aurora Park, what Morrison had told me. I pulled my hands back from the controls. Nope, not today. I turned the drone away from the wreck, from that inviting dark hole, and began the ascent sequence. Whatever was inside that ship could stay there. I wasn't about to find out. The drone climbed steadily. 6,000 meters, 5,000, 4,000. I kept my eyes on the depth gauge, not looking back at the wreck, not giving in to the pull I still felt. Once I hit 3,000 meters, I tried the comms again. Command, this is Elliot. Do you copy? Copy, Elliot. It was Peters. Report status. I need to see you and Colonel Pearson. Found something you should know about. A pause. What kind of something? A shipwreck. World War II destroyer. At 8,900 meters. Another, longer pause. Bring the drone up. Report to my office immediately. 20 minutes later, I was sitting across from Peters in her office. She looked tired. More tired than usual. Tell me exactly what you saw, she said. I described the wreck, the split hull, the gun turret, the hole in the side, the way it was sitting on a ledge that shouldn't have been able to hold it. And you didn't investigate further? She asked. No, ma'am. Turned around and came back up. She nodded, almost to herself. Good. Good. That's it? There's a World War II destroyer sitting at the bottom of the Mariana Trench, and all you have to say is good. Peters leaned forward, resting her elbows on her desk. What you saw wasn't a shipwreck, Elliot. I blinked. What? I know what I saw. I've seen plenty of... It wasn't a shipwreck, she repeated, cutting me off. Not a real one anyway. Then what the hell was it? She sighed, rubbing at her temples. We've seen them before. Structures that look like ships, planes, even submarines. Always at depths where they couldn't possibly be. Always with some way to get inside. I don't understand. They're lures, Elliot. Like an anglerfish's light. They're designed to make you curious, to draw you in. I sat back in my chair. Designed by what? Peters didn't answer right away. She looked out the small window behind her desk at the endless dark water. We don't know exactly, but whatever lives down there, it understands us, understands human psychology, knows that we're curious by nature, that we want to explore, to help. It uses that against us. So it's intelligent? In its way, yes, but not like us, not human intelligence. She looked back at me. You did the right thing, turning away. The people who investigate those wrecks don't come back, or if they do, they're not themselves anymore. I thought about that dark opening in the hull, how badly I'd wanted to look inside, how something had seemed to pull at me, urging me forward. What happens if someone does investigate? I asked. Peters's face went hard. That's classified, Elliot. All you need to know is that you followed protocol and you're still here. She dismissed me after that, told me to get some rest. But I couldn't stop thinking about that wreck, about what Peters had said. Lures designed by something intelligent, something that understood human psychology. Over the next few days, I started paying more attention to what was happening around me. The way Pearson would study reports on his tablet, quickly turning it off when someone walked by. How Dr. Peters spent hours analyzing sonar data from below the 10,000 meter mark, deeper than we were supposed to go. The crew members who went quiet when I entered a room, who changed the subject when I asked about previous missions. Little things I hadn't noticed before, or hadn't thought to question. I was in the mess hall getting coffee when I overheard two of the science team talking in low voices at a corner table. Containment protocols were updated again, one of them said. Third time this month. You think the monitoring schedule will change? The other asked. Probably. You know how it goes. Every time there's activity, They noticed me then, went silent, nodded at me and left their table, taking their conversation elsewhere. Containment, monitoring, activity. The pieces started coming together. The rules on the card, the things below 9,000 meters, the lures designed to attract humans. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in my bunk, staring at the ceiling, thinking about what I'd learned, about what I'd seen. The deep current wasn't just a research vessel. We weren't just mapping the trench or studying thermal vents. We were watching something that lived in the deepest parts of the ocean, something intelligent enough to create traps specifically designed to appeal to humans. We weren't explorers. We were sentinels. I was in my 9th week on the deep current when I came closest to breaking all the rules at once. The control room had become comfortable by then, familiar territory with its wall of screens, the hum of cooling fans, the slight vibration through the floor from the ship's engines. I'd settled into my chair for a 12-hour shift, operating Drone 3 in the eastern quadrant at depths Command had specifically told me to avoid until now. Proceed to 9,500 meters, Peters had instructed during morning briefing. Standard mapping protocol, no deviations. I'd raised my eyebrows but kept my mouth shut. 9,500 was deeper than I'd been allowed since that first week when I'd pushed it to 9,950 and gotten my ass chewed by Pearson. Problem with the assignment, Elliot? Peters had asked. No, ma'am, just noting the depth. She'd given me that look, the one that said she knew exactly what I was thinking. This is a directed operation. Colonel Pearson and I will be monitoring from command. Now, 3 hours into the shift, Drone 3 hung suspended in the crushing darkness, its cameras and sensors my only window into a world that shouldn't exist. According to the gauge, we were at 9,498 meters, nearly 2 miles down. The drone's sonar pinged steadily, painting the bottom contours in grayscale across my left screen. Nothing unusual, just the endless mudflats of the trench floor stretching out like a desert. I took a sip of coffee, grimaced at the cold bitterness. My 3rd cup since starting the shift, and it wasn't even helping anymore. I reached for the thermos to pour another when the sonar blipped. Something big, something that shouldn't be there. I set the thermos down, leaned forward. The shape was angular but massive, easily 100 meters across. Too regular to be natural, too big to be man-made. At these depths, nothing built by human hands could survive except our specially designed drones. I adjusted the drone's position, moving it 20 meters closer for a better scan. The shape came into sharper focus on the sonar. It looked almost like a building, but that was impossible. Command, this is Elliot. I'm picking up an anomalous structure at 9,500 meters. Request guidance. Static answered me. I tried again, got the same result. Communications blackout. It happens sometimes at extreme depths. Protocol said to ascend to re-establish contact, but curiosity nailed my hand to the controls. I glanced at the laminated card taped to my console. Rule number 1, never use drone lights below 8,000 meters. My finger hovered over the light switch. The structure was right there. Just a quick look, then I'd follow protocol. I pulled my hand back. I'd seen what happened to people who broke the rules, or at least I'd heard about it. Aurora Park, Sarah Kim, even Benny with his shaking hands and haunted eyes. But something about this was different. It wasn't a shipwreck or plane. It wasn't a lure like Peters had described. This was something else entirely. I decided on a compromise. No lights, but I'd get closer, use the thermal imaging instead. I eased the drone forward, watching the thermal display. The structure was slightly warmer than the surrounding water. Not by much, just 2 degrees. Enough to make it stand out against the cold darkness. As the drone drew within 50 meters, I could make out more details. The structure wasn't rigid like a building. It seemed to pulse slightly, expanding and contracting in a slow, steady rhythm. Like breathing. I blinked hard, tried to clear my head. Buildings don't breathe. Shipwrecks don't pulse. But there it was on my screen, a massive structure with organic movement. "What the hell are you?" I whispered. As if in answer, the structure changed. Patterns of light, soft blue and green, began to ripple across its surface. Bioluminescence, but not random. These moved with purpose, creating shapes that shifted and flowed. Rule number 3. If bioluminescence forms patterns, terminate dive and report. I knew I should hit the emergency ascent button. My hand even twitched toward it. But I couldn't look away from those patterns. They weren't just random flickers. They were responding to us. To the drone. The lights would pulse outward from wherever the drone moved, like ripples in a pond. I'd seen plenty of bioluminescent creatures before. Jellyfish, plankton, those weird anglerfish with their glowing lures. This was different. This was communication. An overwhelming urge to get closer gripped me. Not just closer, inside. Because now I could see what looked like openings in the structure, passages that appeared and disappeared as sections folded and unfolded. My finger moved to the thruster control. Just a little closer. Just a peek. "No," I said out loud, forcing my hand back. "Don't be stupid, Gary." The patterns intensified, became more complex. Swirls and lines and shapes I couldn't name flowed across the surface of the structure. And with each new pattern, the pull got stronger. Not physical. The drone wasn't being dragged, but the pull on me, on my mind. I wanted to see inside. I needed to see inside. My hand moved to the light switch again. One quick flash, just to see. "Elliot, report status immediately." Pearson's voice crashed through the speakers, breaking whatever hold those patterns had on me. I jerked back in my chair, heart hammering against my ribs. I'm here, sir. Communications were down. We can see your telemetry. What are you doing? Why haven't you initiated ascent protocol?" I looked at my screens. The drone was now 30 meters from the structure, 20 meters closer than when I'd last checked the distance. I didn't remember moving it forward. "Sir, I've found some kind of structure. It's massive and it's active." "Active? Explain." "Bioluminescent patterns, sir, responding to the drone's presence, and the structure itself seems to be moving, changing shape." A pause. I could almost hear Pearson and Peters conferring off mic. "Elliot, this is a direct order. Full reverse thrust. Maximum ascent. Do not approach any closer. Do not activate lights. Do not attempt further communication with the structure." Communication. He'd said it, not me. Pearson knew exactly what this was. "Yes, sir. Initiating ascent now." I pushed the throttle forward, angling the drone upward. The structure continued to pulse with light, the patterns becoming more frantic as the drone began to pull away. Then the structure changed again. Whole sections began to unfold, opening like the petals of some monstrous flower. The thermal imaging showed vast chambers inside, darker spaces within the warm mass. And in those chambers, movement. Shadows shifting against shadows, things I couldn't quite make out. "Elliot, faster ascent, now!" I jammed the throttle to maximum, but couldn't tear my eyes away from the screen. The chambers were filled with something. Dozens, maybe hundreds of shapes moving inside, flowing like liquid but with purpose. "Sir, there's something inside. Multiple somethings. I think they're..." "Cut the feed to your secondary screens. Focus only on ascent parameters." "But sir, that's an order, Elliot." I hit the switch, cutting the thermal and sonar feeds to just the primary navigation screen. The drone was at 9,000 meters now, climbing steadily. But something had changed. The drone's external sensors were picking up movement in the water around it. Not current, not fish, something else. I switched the rear camera feed back on. Black shapes were streaming out of the structure, following the drone upward, dozens of them, moving fast. "Sir, we've got company. Multiple contacts pursuing the drone. Maintain course and speed. Do not deviate." The shapes were gaining. 8,500 meters. 8,000 meters. "They're getting closer, sir. I could try evasive. Negative. Straight ascent. Maximum speed. 7,000 meters." The shapes were close enough now that I could make out details on the camera. They weren't solid, more like swirling darkness given form. No visible eyes or mouths or limbs, just flowing black masses that moved with impossible speed through the water. 6,000 meters, 5,000, 4,000. The shapes still followed, matching the drone's pace exactly, neither gaining nor losing ground. 3,000 meters. The lead shape was now just meters behind the drone. I braced for impact, for alarms, for something. But at exactly 10,000 meters depth, they stopped. All of them, simultaneously, as if they'd hit an invisible wall. They hung there, swirling in place, as the drone continued its ascent. "Sir, they've stopped at 10,000 meters exactly, all of them." "Confirmed," came Peters's voice now. "Continue ascent, full recovery." I watched the shapes grow smaller on my screen as the drone climbed. They didn't retreat back to the structure. They just stayed there, hovering at that precise depth, like sentinels at a boundary they couldn't cross. When I finally docked the drone an hour later, my shirt was soaked with sweat and my hands wouldn't stop shaking. Pearson and Peters were waiting for me in the control room. "Conference room. Now," was all Pearson said. I spent the next 4 hours being debriefed, describing everything I'd seen in exhaustive detail. They recorded it all, made me draw sketches, had me point out exactly where on the maps I'd encountered the structure. "Has anyone else seen this thing?" I asked when they finally seemed satisfied. Peters and Pearson exchanged one of their looks. "Yes," Peters said finally, "but not many have seen it and returned with their drone intact." My last week on the Deep Current was different. I wasn't assigned any more dives. Instead, I spent most of it in briefings with Peters, learning things I suspected most of the crew didn't know. On my final day, she called me to her office. When I arrived, she was standing by a secure terminal I'd never seen used before. "Sit down, Elliot," she said, gesturing to the chair beside her. "There are some things you need to see before you leave." She entered a complex password, then pressed her thumb to a scanner. The screen lit up with classified footage. "These are recordings from previous expeditions," she explained. "What you're about to see has the highest security clearance. If you discuss this with anyone not directly involved in this project, you will face severe consequences. Do you understand?" "Yes, ma'am." She nodded, then started the first video. It showed drone footage similar to what I'd seen during my time here, but the timestamp was from 3 years ago. The operator was breaking rules, lights on at 9,000 meters, investigating what looked like a sunken yacht. "This was Sarah Kim's last dive," Peters said quietly. I watched as the drone entered the yacht through a broken hull section. The interior looked normal at first, waterlogged luxury, but then the lights began to flicker. Not the drone's lights, but something on the walls of the yacht. Patterns, just like I'd seen on the structure. The drone stopped responding to controls. Instead, it began moving deeper into the yacht on its own. "Kim reported losing control here," Peters narrated. "Watch what happens next." The drone turned down a corridor that shouldn't have existed in a yacht that size. The passage kept going, far longer than possible. The walls changed too, no longer looking like a ship, but something else entirely, something organic. Then the screen went black. "We lost the feed here," Peters said. "When it came back on 2 minutes later, this is what we saw." The screen flickered back to life. The drone was now in a vast chamber filled with the same black flowing shapes I'd seen pursuing my drone. They surrounded it, seeming to examine it from all angles. Then they parted, revealing something in the center of the chamber. It looked almost like a control panel, but made of the same organic, pulsing material as the structure I'd encountered. The drone moved toward it without operator input. Peters paused the video. "Kim died seconds after this frame. Massive cerebral hemorrhage, just like Aurora Park." She queued up another video. This one showed a different drone investigating a crashed plane at 8,000 meters. Again, the drone entered the wreckage against protocol. Again, the interior changed, becoming something else entirely. This time, strange lights appeared, leading the drone deeper like breadcrumbs. This was Lieutenant Walker, 2 years ago. Same result. Video after video showed the same pattern. Operators breaking the rules. Drones being lured or taken over. Strange structures that couldn't possibly exist. And always, those black, flowing shapes. "What are they?" I finally asked. "We don't know exactly," Peters admitted, "but we know they're ancient, intelligent, and hostile to human intrusion." "And that structure I found? We call it a node. There are 7 that we know of, all deeper than 9,000 meters. They appear to be some kind of bases, or maybe they're the entities themselves. We're not sure." She closed the video files and turned to face me directly. "The rules weren't created arbitrarily, Elliot. They were written in blood. Every single one exists because we lost people learning what not to do. Don't use lights below 8,000 meters. That attracts them. Don't re-establish contact with a lost drone. They can use it to establish a connection with the operator. Don't investigate bioluminescent patterns. They use them to influence human minds." "So the Deep Current isn't really a research vessel," I said, finally putting it all together. "We're not here to study the trench." "No," Peters agreed. "We're here to monitor them, to ensure they stay contained in the abyss. For some reason, they can't or won't come above 10,000 meters. That's the only thing keeping them down there. Our job is to make sure it stays that way." I woke up on my last day the same as my first. Same narrow bunk, same gray walls, same distant hum of the ship's engines. But I wasn't the same guy who'd signed that contract 6 months back. My duffel sat packed in the corner. Didn't take long. 6 months at sea doesn't leave much room for collecting stuff. Just my clothes, a few books, and that damn laminated card with the 5 rules. I'd thought about throwing it overboard a dozen times, but somehow I couldn't. Maybe as a reminder, maybe as proof. I pulled on my coveralls one last time and headed for the mess. The corridor felt longer than usual, or maybe I was just dragging my feet. Hard to be excited about leaving when you know what's staying behind. The mess was half empty. Nobody talked much these days. Not since we lost Drone 1 last month. Not since whatever was down there started getting more active. I grabbed coffee and toast, found my usual corner. "Morning, Elliot." I looked up to see Peter standing there, clipboard in hand. Her face had gotten thinner these past months, more lines around her eyes. "Morning, Doc. Your replacement arrives today. Helicopter's due at 1300. I nodded, pushing my toast around the plate. "They tell her what she's really signing up for?" Peter's mouth tightened. "She knows what she needs to know." Right. I took a sip of coffee, just like I did. Peters didn't answer that, just checked something off on her clipboard and walked away. After breakfast, I headed to the control room one last time. Didn't have any official duties, but I wanted to see it again. The place where I'd spent most of my waking hours these past 6 months, where I'd seen things I couldn't unsee. The room was empty when I got there, screens dark. Drone 2 docked for maintenance after yesterday's run. Drone 3 ready for deployment. We never replaced Drone 1. I sat in my chair, ran my hand over the familiar controls. The comms panel where I'd heard that voice calling for help. The sonar display that had shown me the node. The depth gauge that had told me when we were getting too close to whatever waited below. The door opened behind me. "Saying goodbye?" Pearson stood in the doorway, hands clasped behind his back. Something like that. He walked in, stood beside me looking at the dark screens. "You did good work, Elliot. Better than most. I followed the rules." "Yes, you did." We both knew what that meant. I hadn't ended up like Aurora Park or Sarah Kim or any of the others whose names nobody said out loud. "What happens now?" I asked. "You go home, sign your final paperwork, receive your pay." "That's not what I meant." Pearson looked at me. "I know what you meant. And you know I can't answer that." I did know. Section 12 of my contract. Everything I'd seen, everything I'd learned, classified until the day I died. "The new operator," I said. "McDonald. She's good? Top of her class. Technical background. Good under pressure according to her psych profile. That won't help her if she breaks the rules." Pearson's mouth tightened. "Then we make sure she doesn't." The helicopter arrived right on schedule. I watched from the upper deck as it touched down, rotors whipping the air. A woman climbed out, hunched under the blades, duffel over her shoulder, red hair cut short, new coveralls, still with the creases from packaging. Ember McDonald, my replacement. Peters met her on the deck, shook her hand. I couldn't hear what they were saying over the helicopter noise, but I knew the script. "Welcome aboard. Your quarters are on C deck. Training begins tomorrow at 600. I headed down to meet them as the helicopter powered down. "Elliot," Peters called when she saw me. "Come meet McDonald." I crossed the deck, extended my hand. "Gary Elliot." "Ember McDonald." Her grip was firm, eyes direct. "You're the one I'm replacing?" "That's right. I've heard good things." She smiled, eager and confident, just like I'd been, looking forward to getting started. Peters looked between us. "Elliot's just finishing up some paperwork before he leaves. McDonald, let me show you to your quarters." "Actually," I said, "I could do that. Give McDonald the tour while you handle the helicopter crew." Peters hesitated, then nodded. "Fine. McDonald's in C-14, your old room." As Peters walked away, McDonald picked up her duffel. "Lead the way." I took her through the narrow corridors, pointing out the mess, the rec room, the showers. She asked the right questions. Technical stuff about the drones, the mapping protocols, the data collection. "How deep do the drones go?" she asked as we reached C deck. 10,000 meters, I said. "That's the crush depth. And the trench goes to 11, right? So we can't map the very bottom?" I stopped walking, looked at her. "Trust me, you don't want to go that deep." Her eyebrows went up. "Why not? Isn't that the whole point of being here? To study the deepest part of the ocean?" I didn't answer. Just opened the door to C-14, my old bunk, my old desk, my old locker, all cleaned out, waiting for her. "Home sweet home," I said. She walked in, dropped her duffel on the bunk, looked around the small space. Not exactly luxury accommodations. You get used to it. She sat on the edge of the bunk. "So what's it really like? Operating the drones?" The listing made it sound pretty routine, but I'm guessing there's more to it. There it was. My chance to warn her. To tell her about the node, the lures, the voices in the deep. The things that waited below 10,000 meters, watching, testing, looking for a way up. I opened my mouth, then closed it again. Thought about Section 12, about what happened to people who broke that particular rule. The door opened behind us. Pearson stood there, holding a laminated card, the same card Peters had given me 6 months ago. "McDonald," he said. "Orientation briefing in 10 minutes. Command deck." "Yes, sir." She stood up. Pearson looked at me, then held out the card to McDonald. "Operational guidelines. Memorize them." She took the card, read it quickly. Her forehead wrinkled. "Never use drone lights below 8,000 meters. But how do we? The briefing will cover all protocols." Pearson cut her off. 10 minutes. He turned to leave, then looked back at me. "Elliot, my office. Now." I followed him out, leaving McDonald staring at the card with the same confusion I'd felt 6 months ago. Pearson's office was bare except for his desk and the chair I sat in. No photos, no personal items, nothing to suggest a life beyond these walls. "You were going to tell her," he said. Not a question. "No. Don't lie to me, Elliot. I saw your face when I walked in." I looked down at my hands. She deserves to know what she's getting into. She knows what she needs to know, same as you did. And if she breaks the rules, if she ends up like the others, Pearson leaned forward, then that's on her, not you. It's on all of us. We bring people here, we don't tell them the truth, and then we act surprised when they get curious. "Your non-disclosure agreement doesn't expire when you leave this ship," Pearson said. "Section 12 violations carry severe penalties." "You threatening me, Colonel? I'm reminding you of your legal obligations." I laughed, hollow and tired. "Right. My legal obligations. What about our moral ones?" Pearson's face hardened. "Our moral obligation is to keep those things contained, to make sure they stay down there where they belong. Everything else is secondary." I stood up. "We done here?" "Almost." He pulled a folder from his desk drawer, slid it across to me. "Your final paperwork. Sign where indicated." I flipped through the pages. More non-disclosure agreements, more warnings about classified information, more threats about what would happen if I talked. I signed them all. What choice did I have? An hour later, I stood on the deck with my duffel at my feet. The helicopter rotors spun up, whipping the air around me. Peters stood nearby, hands in her lab coat pockets. "You'll receive your final pay when you reach the mainland," she said. I nodded. "Take care of McDonald. She'll be fine." "Will she?" Peters looked away. "She'll follow the rules. Like all the others did?" She didn't answer that. The helicopter pilot gave the signal. Time to go. I picked up my duffel, took one last look around the deck of the Deep Current. My home for 6 months. My prison for just as long. As I turned to board, I saw McDonald watching from an upper deck doorway. Our eyes met. I raised my hand in a half wave. She returned it, curious and eager, ready to start her new job mapping the ocean floor. I wanted to shout a warning, to tell her to get out while she could, to run from this ship and never look back. Instead, I climbed into the helicopter and buckled in. As we lifted off, I looked down at the Deep Current growing smaller below us. Just a tiny speck on the vast ocean. 3 miles of water beneath its hull, and 4 more miles of darkness below that. Darkness where things waited, watched, tested. The ship disappeared from view as we banked toward the mainland, but I knew I'd never really leave it behind. Part of me would always be there, in that control room, staring at those screens, watching the depths, and remembering the things that watched back from the darkness below.